In a world of light and darkness, there was the saint. She was the one who drove back the shadows and brought hope. When she performed miracles, it was said the gods themselves blessed her, and even monsters would shudder in awe. She was a guide for all people, and in return, she was loved by all. When she healed the wounded, people offered her their prayers. When she ended a famine, minstrels wrote songs in her name. But this saint, the one everyone adored, had a secret. A very big one. Surprisingly, the saint was a slime. The weakest of all monsters, living a lie where it would be finished the moment its identity was revealed. The story began in the grand mansion of Duke Aspic. Inside a lavish dining room, an older butler with a serious face lifted a silver dome from a plate. He announced to the young lady seated at the table that her meal was ready. Servants stood in a line against the wall, trembling with worry. The young woman, known as Lady Jelly, looked down at the perfectly cooked fish. A muscle in her eye twitched. With a sudden crash, she smashed the plate and its cover from the butler's hands. Food splattered across his face and uniform as the other servants jolted in shock. Lady Jelly calmly stated that she had a craving for meat and told them to hurry. The older butler, dripping with sauce, smiled broadly. He assured Lady Jelly that they had a fresh fillet of boar and asked how she would like it cooked. Lady Jelly sighed, closing her eyes for a moment. She asked the butler how long he had worked there. He replied that he had been serving her for a little over 30 years. She then reminded him that it was an important day for her training as a saint and that he should already know how she liked her food. The butler suggested he would have the cook make it well done. Lady Jelly paused. The butler suddenly realized his mistake, a look of horror crossing his face as he clapped his hands over his mouth. He immediately threw himself to the floor amidst the spilled food, begging for forgiveness. He explained that he thought it would be best if she didn't have any raw food before her training. As he apologized, Lady Jelly calmly placed her foot on his head. She said she understood. Then, grinding her heel into the man's head, she added that some punishment was required. With a snap of her fingers, the doors burst open. Guards rushed in and grabbed the older butler, who screamed for them to wait. Lady Jelly watched with a small, cruel smile as another guard handed her a riding crop. The terrified butler was dragged down the hall, pleading for someone to help him, while the other servants watched, shaking in fear. Lady Jelly turned to the line of servants and used the handle of her crop to tug one of the younger butlers forward, asking if he had a moment. With a wide smile, she ordered him to take the food to the punishment room. She purred that she loved her meat dripping with blood. As the servants bowed and scurried away to follow her orders, Lady Jelly walked down the hall, swinging her crop. She was the only daughter of the noble Aspic family, given the finest education since she was a child. But because of her outrageously spoiled upbringing, she had become a heinous villainess, even though she was a saint. Far away, in a peaceful forest known as the Slime Village, a small, translucent slime rested by a sparkling stream. It felt hungry. It spotted a caterpillar crawling on a leaf and quickly gobbled it up. As it hopped onto a rock, it noticed a human figure walking through the trees. That was unusual. The slime remembered the village chief's warning. The chief had told them that some humans could slay even dragons, and that they should never approach one recklessly. The slime decided it was best to hide. It watched the human from a distance, thinking how lucky they were. Humans never went hungry and lived in big houses, so different from slimes who had to live secretly in the forest. The slime wished it could become a human and say goodbye to a life of constantly searching for food. It moped, knowing that a slime was just a slime. Suddenly, the human called out a friendly hello. The slime looked up and saw a girl in traveler's clothes smiling at it. She apologized for scaring it and promised she wouldn't do anything. She explained that she hadn't expected to see a fellow kin in such a place and couldn't help but say hello. The slime was confused. A fellow kin? The girl held up her hand, showing a small cut with slime-like thing oozing out of it. She smiled and said that she was a slime, too. The little slime bounced in excitement, wanting to know how she became a human. The girl laughed and asked if it really wanted to know. Later, the girl sat on a rock, with the slime beside her. She explained the process. The slime had to mimic human blood. It was possible, she said, for a slime to become a human. She explained that it had to find a corpse that was as fresh as possible and enter it. Human life was the best, she continued, especially the food. She offered the slime a piece of jerky. The slime thought it looked like tree bark but extended a part of its body to try it. The taste was incredible. The slime shook and wobbled with delight. It wondered if humans ate such tasty things every day. The girl laughed and told it that jerky was nothing, The human world was filled with much tastier food. She introduced herself as Lemur and told the slime that if it was interested, she would see it in the human world someday. As Lemur walked away, the slime sat alone, still thinking about the amazing taste of the jerky. That night, under the bright full moon, it came to a decision. Slimes could become human. It would look for a corpse. Its search began. It found a figure in full armor lying on the ground, but when it lifted the helmet's visor, it saw only a skull inside. The head rolled off, and the slime drooped in despair. Finding a fresh corpse was hard. As it sat, wondering where to rest, it saw something strange. On a high cliff nearby, a large figure stood, and then another figure was pushed off the edge. The slime heard a whoosh and turned just as rocks and debris crumbled down around it. Something was falling. The shadowy figure landed with a heavy thud on a tree branch, then quickly moved on. The slime peeked out from behind a tree, frightened, as it saw feet walking away. On the forest floor, near the base of a tree, lay a dark shape. Cautiously, the slime hopped closer. It was a human. A young woman with long, light hair lay on the ground, wearing beautiful clothes with a sparkling stone. Her hair was smooth and dry. The slime knew what this was. She was what Lemur had called a noble. It wondered why she had fallen, but that didn't matter now. The slime hopped onto her chest to investigate. She wasn't moving, and there was a faint smell of poison. There was no breathing, no thumping sound from her chest. But when the slime touched her neck, she was still a little bit warm. This meant it had found a fresh corpse. The slime bounced with excitement. It could finally become a human. Remembering Lemur's instructions to mimic the blood, it slid into the noblewoman's open mouth. First, it had to get the poison out. The poison was strong, but it had no effect on a slime. It worked to push the poison out. Next was the heart. Unlike a slime's core, a human was driven by their heart. It needed to get it going. The slime focused all its energy, but it was harder than it expected. It couldn't get the heart to work right. It felt so tired, so weak. It decided to sleep for just a little while. Sometime later, consciousness returned. Its vision was blurry. Its body felt heavy and it was very thirsty. It crawled to the nearby stream and began to drink. As it looked down, it saw a reflection in the water. A face with large eyes stared back. It was not a slime. It looked at its hands, then back at the reflection. It had worked. It was a human. It jumped up in celebration, filled with joy. But standing was difficult. It wobbled and fell over. As it lay in the grass, it remembered what Lemur said. It had to imitate the original human accurately. It focused, reaching into the body's memories. And then it saw them. Horrible, bloody visions of a girl with a cruel smile, holding a riding crop, surrounded by people screaming in agony. This human, she was crazy. The slime, now in a human body, retched in disgust. If it imitated such a person, it would be resented. In fact, she already was. This was an utter failure. And Lemur had said that once you take over a body, you can never go back to being a slime. It was trapped. It was going to be killed for acting like her. In fact, she had probably been killed once already for it. A chill ran through its new body. If it clumsily tried to fool them and they found out it was a slime, it would be hunted down as a monster. It was going to be killed no matter what it did. It collapsed onto the grass, sobbing. But then, another memory surfaced. This human, as terrible as her personality was, wasn't just a noble. She was also a saint. An idea began to form. It didn't have to be a villainess. It could become a saint loved by all. That was the path to safety, to the ideal life it had always dreamed of. It would be hard, but clutching its fist with new determination, it decided to do its best. The forest floor was an unsteady, treacherous thing. Each step was a gamble, a wobbling negotiation between mind and body. Controlling this new human form was agonizingly difficult. Its brain knew what to do: step forward with the right foot, stretch out the left hand for balance. But the limbs refused to cooperate smoothly. With a gasp, its heel slipped on a moss-covered rock, sending it tumbling backward onto the soft earth. It sat there for a moment, flustered and defeated, as small birds chirped and landed nearby, utterly unconcerned with its plight. This was the return of the devil, though not in the way anyone would ever suspect. The true devil was gone, and in its place was a creature simply trying not to fall over. Pushing itself up, it decided walking was too inefficient. Rolling, however, was something it understood. For a moment, it flopped onto the grass and rolled forward, a far faster way to travel. But this wouldn't do. Slimes didn't need hands or feet, but humans did. fine movements, like using its fingers, felt like a distant dream. For now, just grabbing something would be a victory. Its eyes landed on a sturdy fallen branch. With great effort, it lifted the stick, using it as a makeshift staff to steady itself. Right foot, left foot. It took a few shaky steps, a small triumph, before its heeled shoe caught on a gnarled tree root, and it slipped again. This time, the fall was worse. It rolled down a short, steep slope with a cry, landing with a huge splash in a cold stream. It sat there, soaked and shivering, the shock of the cold water and the sting of scraped skin flooding its new senses. It was painful, but the feeling was also a confirmation. This was real. It had fully become a human. A single tear welled in its eye and dripped onto its hand. Human skin was so fragile. Looking closer at its finger, it saw a small cut from the fall. But from the wound, a single drop of colorless, transparent liquid welled up. It's blood. The sight sent a jolt of panic through it. If anyone saw this, its identity as a slime would be revealed instantly. It now understood a new, critical rule for its survival. It could never, ever let itself get hurt in front of humans. With renewed determination, it stood, using the staff for support. It had to learn to walk properly, to move in a way that wouldn't look unnatural when it finally met people. Right, left, it practiced again and again, staggering along the forest path. After a time, sunlight streamed through the canopy, and it paused with a sigh of relief. The scenery, seen through human eyes, was breathtakingly beautiful. It watched two deer grazing in a sunlit patch, a sight more vivid than anything it had ever perceived before. As a slime, it had only sensed the flow of magicules. Now it could see color, light, and life. The breeze felt wonderful against its skin, the smell of the night air was rich and complex, and the stars shone with a brilliance it had never imagined. It was truly glad it had become a human. Eventually, it emerged from the trees onto a high, rocky cliff. Spread out below in the valley was a sight that made it gasp. A town. A real human town, with a castle perched on a hill above it. With breathless excitement, it managed to say the word aloud, though it came out as a clumsy, awe-filled mumble. It finally arrived, staggering into a bustling street filled with people. The joy was overwhelming. It was here, in a human town. It turned in a slow circle, taking in all the sights and sounds. There were so many humans. But then a familiar sight caught its eye. Two figures in dark armor were walking down the street, their hands resting on the hilts of their swords. Instinct took over. It darted behind the corner of a building, hiding from the guards. A memory flashed in its mind, an image of a knight's sword slashing down on a helpless slime. Its new heart pounded with a fear it had never known. It peeked around the corner only after they were a safe distance away. Taking a deep breath, it reminded itself that it was a human now. It had nothing to fear. Nearby, a mother was gently patting her young child's head. The slime watched them, coming to a simple conclusion: humans must be pleased when their heads are patted. A moment later, the small child spotted it and pointed, telling his mother that a beautiful woman was there. The slime offered a friendly wave, then stepped forward to try the gesture it had just learned, gently patting the surprised boy on the head. The child blushed, but his mother went completely pale. She whispered a name, her voice shaking with terror. Lady Jelly. In an instant, she snatched her child and dashed away, calling out a panicked apology. The slime watched them go, confused. Soon, others in the crowd noticed it. A ripple of fear turned into a wave of panic. Shouts and screams erupted as the townspeople fled, slamming doors and shuttering windows. In seconds, the bustling street was utterly deserted. It was left standing alone, reaching a hand out to the empty air, wondering what had just happened. It sighed, the truth settling in with a heavy weight. They hated her. Terribly. The path to getting along with humans was going to be very long indeed. Following the faint traces of the original human's memories, it found its way to an enormous, ornate mansion. This seemed to be the right house, but its sheer size was intimidating. As it staggered towards the entrance, it saw three men in butlers' uniforms standing at the door. They saw it at the same time, and their reactions were immediate and violent. One gasped, another jolted back, and the third glared with a mixture of rage and fear. They were so surprised, so horrified, that the slime worried its mimicry was failing. The butlers stood trembling, stammering out Lady Jelly's name. But then, as if a switch had been flipped, they were joined by a line of maids, and the entire staff bowed low in a formal greeting. They welcomed it back, saying it must be tired after its long trip. The slime breathed an internal sigh of relief. They hadn't found it out. It walked through the path they created, awed by the deference. This was what it meant to be a noble. It closed its eyes, savoring the moment, and didn't see the older butler from its memories standing behind the others, his mouth agape in shock. The older butler stepped forward and addressed it, making it jump. He noted its disheveled state and commented that it must have undergone intense training. He offered to have a bath prepared immediately. The slime panicked. What was the right answer? What would the real jelly say? Afraid of revealing itself, it turned and hurried up the steps to escape the conversation. It paused and awkwardly announced to the staff that it was tired and wished to sleep now. The words felt unnatural, and the shocked faces of the servants confirmed it. In a desperate move, it forced a gentle smile, hoping to smooth over the awkwardness. The effect was the opposite of what it intended. A deep, unnerving chill fell over everyone. Suddenly, the entire staff threw themselves to the ground, prostrating themselves and trembling. They apologized profusely and promised to prepare its bed at once, begging for forgiveness. Confused but relieved that it had somehow worked, the slime simply said it understood and walked inside. The older butler lifted his head from the floor, a look of complete bewilderment on his face at the uncharacteristically calm response, before jumping to his feet and barking orders at the maids. The bed was impossibly soft. It fell back onto the mountain of pillows, a stark contrast to a lifetime of sleeping on grass. But as it lay there, the day's events replayed in its mind, the townspeople screaming and running, the servants reacting to a simple smile with absolute terror. They really, truly hated this human. As it rolled over, another memory surfaced. It felt like it had seen servants' clothes back in the forest, near the cliff. A horrible thought struck it, and it shot upright in bed. Could it be that one of the servants in this very house was the one who killed her? It had to examine the situation more carefully. It sifted through the memories again. The original jelly was a saint, on her way to the mountains for training. In the middle of that, someone had poisoned her and thrown her from a cliff. The culprit was one of the servants from this house. It remembered the clothes distinctly. But as it tried to picture the attacker, it realized something strange. It couldn't remember the killer's face. The weight of it all was crushing. So many problems, so many dangers. It squeezed a pillow to its chest, wondering if it could ever become a saint loved by all. But it had finally made it this far. Exhaustion took over, and its eyes drifted shut. It would allow itself to sleep well, just for today. It would start working hard tomorrow. Next day, a gentle morning light filtered through the ornate glass of a towering window, painting stripes of gold across a room larger than any clearing the slime had ever known. It greeted the morning on a soft bed. Outside, small birds chirped on the windowsill. The comfort was so deep, so complete, that it snuggled further into the bedding with a soft murmur. A sharp knock echoed from the grand bedroom door. A maid announced that preparations for its meal were complete. Slowly, the slime sat up in the enormous canopy bed, rubbing one sleepy eye with a fist. From the doorway, the unseen maid asked if her lady had slept well. Still barefoot and unsteady, it staggered out of bed, reaching a hand toward a vanity table to steady itself. Its eyes met the reflection in the mirror, and a raw, terrified shriek tore from its new throat. The maid outside jolted at the sound. Bursting into the room, her face a mask of panic as she asked if Lady Jelly was all right. The slime just stared into the mirror, a hand clapped over its mouth. Then, realization dawned. A wave of relief, almost joyful, washed over it as it remembered. That's right. It had become a human. It turned to the worried maid with a bright, reassuring smile, thanking her and telling her it was all right. The maid stopped dead, her expression turning from concern to utter shock. She stammered, blushing and flustered, wondering if she had misheard the words, "Thank you." Finally, she managed to ask if her lady would prefer a meat or a fish dish that day. The slime's eyes closed in a blissful smile as it drooled slightly, decisively choosing meat. In a grand dining hall, a thick steak sizzled on a hot grill, the sound filling the air. The chef, a man with a stern face, worked methodically. At a long table nearby, the slime fidgeted in its chair, hands clasped, sweating with sheer excitement. A line of butlers and maids stood by, watching its strange, eager display with nervous, confused expressions. Finally, a butler's hand placed a plate bearing the large, perfectly cooked steak on the table. He stammered a thank you for her patience. The slime looked down at the food with sparkling, joyous eyes, a small, excited version of its true form bouncing in its mind. It let out an exuberant cry, exclaiming that the food had finally arrived. The assembled servants stared in pure shock at the outburst. One maid even let out an audible gasp. Remembering itself, it took a breath. It couldn't do things that would reveal its identity. It calmly picked up its knife and fork, properly thanking them for the meal before taking its first bite. The flavor was an explosion of sensation. Overcome with delight, it lost all composure, shaking as its knife and fork began to slam against the table. The butlers jolted at the sudden noise. It immediately straightened up, regaining its composure with a pleased expression, though it internally chided itself for messing up again. Still, it thought it was unfair for food to taste so good. It took another bite, this time with sauce, blushing as it savored the taste. The rich flavor sent it shaking with delight once more. It turned to address the chef, asking if he had a moment. The man flinched back, his face instantly pale with terror. With a blissful smile, the slime began to speak a single syllable. The chef stared, confused, repeating the sound in his mind. Then, his confusion morphed into complete, abject horror. There was no way. His mind flashed to a horrifying memory. He imagined a shadowed Lady Jelly, smiling cruelly as she smacked a riding crop into her palm. He thought she was about to announce his discipline. He had seen so many servants crippled by her punishments, which had grown outrageously worse recently. He remembered the head butler, a man who had served for over 30 years, screaming in agony, now beyond recovery. The nickname they had for her, whispered in secret when they saw her smiling during these sessions, was the heinous villainess. The chef, now sweating profusely in the present, panicked. He couldn't figure out where he had gone wrong. He had even made the meat she liked. Thinking of his wife and son, knowing he couldn't leave them behind, he threw himself to the floor, prostrating himself and beginning to beg for her to spare him. But the slime, its face still shining with bliss and a few crumbs around its mouth, finished its thought. The meal was divine. The chef looked up from the floor, completely bewildered. The butlers behind him were just as confused. Before he could process it, the slime was out of its seat, enthusiastically grabbing his hands. It beamed at him, exclaiming that what he made was very delicious, much better than a caterpillar. The servants exchanged baffled glances. With a huff, it turned and walked away, adding that he was at least more useful than a caterpillar. The chef just stood there in a daze, wondering if he had, by some miracle, actually been praised. The other servants buzzed around him, expressing their relief that he had narrowly escaped death. Just then, a blonde maid approached, presenting a large, elaborate cake. As she announced it, she staggered, letting out a small cry of alarm. The entire cake flew from its platter and landed with a huge splat directly on the slime's head and face. The maid froze in terror, certain her life was over. Cake and frosting dripped down its hair as it stood there, holding a large piece of the fallen dessert. The maid trembled, holding the empty platter. She bowed low, beginning to apologize for her carelessness. But as she spoke, the slime simply took a big bite of the cake it was holding. It shook its head, still covered in frosting, and started to speak. The other servants tensed, a chill running through them as they anticipated a violent correction. This time, for sure, the maid thought her punishment was coming. With a blissful expression, the slime asked if she could please bring it some more. The maid's mind went blank with shock. She immediately bowed again, offering to bring a change of clothes at once. The slime held up a hand, telling her that could wait. It then asked if her legs were okay from when she stumbled. The maid, flustered, replied that she was fine. Smiling happily while licking frosting from its finger, the slime told her to be careful next time, and then to please bring it a second serving right away. A collective chill of terror once again seized the staff. The blonde maid let out a frightened yelp. A butler's eyes widened in horror. That meant, he thought, to be careful with their lives next time. Later, the servants whispered among themselves. One noted that ever since she came back, she felt like a different person. Another agreed, pointing out her strange table manners. As the blonde maid served a new, pristine cake, she couldn't help but feel terrified of getting involved, even though nothing bad had happened so far. They all watched as the slime gazed at the new cake with pure joy. It was just a trick, they reasoned. She always did this, lulling them with unusual behavior. After all, she was the heinous villainess. They were sure she would blame them for everything later. The slime paused, its fork halfway to its mouth, its happy expression fading into something more serious. It could hear them all. Well, it thought they were exactly right. It was a different person. It was a slime on the inside. A slime saint, if you will. Still, it wondered just how much hate did they have for her. It closed its eyes, remembering a basic rule it had observed. smile when you make eye contact. That was the basis of how humans get along. It tried it, looking up at the staff with a serene smile. One of the servants flinched, his face shadowed with fear. Was she threatening him? The slime then spoke, catching their attention out of curiosity. The servants jolted, and one stiffly answered yes. With a hopeful, blushing expression, it looked at the tall stack of empty plates one of the maids was holding. It asked if the main course was still not ready. The entire staff simply stared, their mouths agape in utter disbelief. In a quiet hallway, away from the dining room, a shadowed butler clenched his fist. He watched the scene with pure hatred, wondering why that heinous villainess was still alive. Another butler stepped up behind him, flanked by others. He confronted the shadowed man, saying this was not what they agreed upon. They had helped him because he swore he could do it. The shadowed butler's hand twitched, and he clenched his fist again, insisting that it wasn't a lie. He was sure he had killed her. The other butler called him a damn liar, snarling at him to go to hell alone. A tense, ugly atmosphere hung in the air as his co-conspirators turned their backs on him. After some time, in a sun-drenched hallway of the Grand Manor, a gloved finger slid silently across the top of a window frame, leaving a clean streak in a fine layer of dust. The senior maid, a stern woman with her dark hair pulled into a tight bun, clapped her hands together, sending a small, accusing puff into the air. Nearby, a young newcomer with freckles and braided pigtails flinched. The younger maid stammered that this was the 5th time she had cleaned that very window. The senior maid, unimpressed, simply ordered her to start over. She blew the dust from her fingertip with an annoyed puff. The newcomer, her eyes welling with tears, could only apologize. With hands on her hips, the senior maid lectured the young maid on her uselessness and disobedience. Standing beside her, the blonde maid who had dropped the cake the day before let out an exasperated sigh. The newcomer, whose name was Erin, thought of the home she had left behind. In her mind, she saw a simple room where she handed bread to her 2 small, happy siblings, while her frail mother watched lovingly from her bed. Erin knew she had to endure this. She steeled herself, thinking of the medicine she needed to buy for her mother, and told the senior maid she would start over immediately. The senior maid placed a hand on Erin's shoulder, her voice taking on a tone of false concern. She claimed she was only saying this for Erin's sake. She snapped a list she was holding for emphasis, warning the girl that if Lady Jelly found even a single speck of dust, she would be done for. Erin winced. The senior maid then asked if she had at least heard the rumors about what happened to her predecessor. Erin certainly had. She recalled the whispered stories of the servant before her, a girl subjected to terrible punishments for leaving the slightest fog on a window. The poor girl had suffered so much that one day, she was simply gone, never to be seen again. The senior maid gestured out the window toward the garden, casually mentioning that a particular tree seemed to have been planted on the very day that servant disappeared. Erin jolted, a cold dread washing over her. She began to tremble as the senior maid leaned in with a knowing, menacing smile, asking if Erin understood what she meant. The senior maid then ordered Erin to repeat the cleaning process at least 5 more times. Erin numbly agreed. With a cruel grin, the senior maid then added that the maid who was supposed to be in charge of Lady Jelly that day had run away. She declared that Erin would do it instead. She should be honored. A deep, bone-rattling chill seized Erin. Her eyes widened in utter terror as she began to shake uncontrollably. A short while later, the senior maid pushed a terrified Erin toward the grand, ornate doors of Lady Jelly's bedroom. Alone now, Erin raised a trembling hand and knocked. She stammered a good morning, announcing that it was time to wake up. Inside, there was only a soft murmur. The slime was fast asleep, snuggled deep within the luxurious pillows. It mumbled about being sleepy and rolled over. Erin pushed through the curtains and entered the room. The sudden movement startled the slime, which jumped out of bed and landed on its feet. Its heart hammered in its chest. It had forgotten for a moment that it was human now, and that another person was so very close. It quickly shook its head, composing its features into a serene smile and murmuring that it must have been half asleep. Erin just stared, confused by her lady's strange reaction. Suddenly, the senior maid appeared, her face a mask of performative horror. She rushed forward and shoved Erin forcefully to her knees. Erin let out a pained grunt. The senior maid then held out a thin riding crop toward the slime, telling her to go ahead. The slime stared at it, completely bewildered. The senior maid explained that whipping a maid who disturbed her sleep was the usual course of action. The slime recoiled as if it had been struck. It refused, tossing the crop aside. It then gently took Erin's hands and helped her to her feet. Erin looked up, her expression a mixture of stun and gratitude, and thanked her new lady. The senior maid was speechless. The slime was appalled. It couldn't fathom how anyone could think of whipping another person just for waking them up. Then it remembered the residue of cruelty left in this body, a flash of the real Lady Jelly gleefully raising a crop to a bloodied, terrified servant. It understood then. It was no wonder they had tried to poison her. Later, the senior maid formally presented the new attendant. Erin introduced herself, her hands clasped and trembling as she bowed. The slime noted her fear. It saw how much this body was hated, even by someone it had barely met. It decided then and there that its mission for the day was to get along with this servant. It returned Erin's greeting with a kind smile. After some time, in the garden, Erin served black tea. The slime was fascinated, inhaling the rich aroma as Erin poured the hot water. It thought human ideas were amazing. It watched as sugar cubes were added to the steaming cup, feeling it was almost too beautiful to drink. Almost. It took a small sip. The bitterness was a shock. Erin's face fell in horror. But the slime paused, thinking. Humans could make meat taste divine. There had to be something to this. It tasted again, sensing a deep, complex flavor hidden beneath the bitterness. This was good in a different way. Erin nervously asked if the tea did not suit her taste. The slime, slightly flustered, tried to find the words. It explained that it was a strange feeling, a bitterness that somehow made it want to drink more, that there was a deep flavor underneath. In the end, it told her that it was very delicious and thanked her. Erin's face transformed. Her cheeks flushed and tears of pure relief and joy welled in her eyes. Still emotional, Erin bowed and said the pleasure was hers. She explained that her mother back home gave her the same compliment when she made tea. A happy memory surfaced of her siblings and her mother all praising her, and she told the slime she had been so happy back then. The slime nodded, acknowledging the precious memory and mentally congratulating itself on a job well done. Erin, feeling more comfortable, explained that her family's compliments were why she had wanted to become a maid and take care of people. She confessed that she had been losing confidence since arriving at the manor, as her seniors did nothing but scold her. But now, she felt a little better. The slime, sensing victory was near, asked how her mother used to compliment her. Erin's face lit up. She explained with a happy blush that her mother always patted her on the head. A light bulb went off in the slime's mind. It remembered seeing a mother pat her son in town. It knew now that humans were elated to have their heads patted. It stood and reached its hand toward Erin, who looked up in confusion. Gently, the slime patted Erin on the head. It assured her that she was doing a fine job. Erin's face froze, her lip quivering. The slime smiled, convinced its gesture was perfect and that it had finally earned a good impression. Then, a single tear dripped from Erin's eye. The slime's happy thoughts vanished. Suddenly, Erin broke down, wailing loudly. The slime panicked, grabbing her arms and asking frantically what was wrong, if she was in pain. Through her sobs, Erin managed to apologize. The slime was horrified, convinced she hated it now, and wondered why its plan had gone so terribly wrong. That night, Erin gazed out her window, a blissful expression on her face. She thought Lady Jelly was a wonderful person, and that the rumors were all false. The senior maid and the blonde maid appeared from behind a curtain. The senior maid smugly asked how her welcome from Lady Jelly had been. Erin turned to them with a sparkling, joyful face, exclaiming that it was wonderful. She gushed that she would like to serve by Lady Jelly's side forever. The two older maids stared, completely dumbfounded. Trying to call her bluff, the senior maid huffed that if Erin liked it so much, she could do it again tomorrow. The blonde maid watched, waiting for the facade to crack. But Erin's face lit up with pure excitement. She clasped her hands together and thanked the senior maid profusely. The two women were stunned into silence. They had tried to foist the heinous villainess upon the newcomer, and she had thanked them for it. The senior maid began to wonder if this newcomer was some kind of incredible, unbelievable girl. Erin, meanwhile, jumped into the air with a happy cheer. In another part of the mansion, the slime was not cheering. It rolled around in its enormous bed, burying its face in the soft covers. It wondered where it had all gone wrong. It was certain that Erin hated it now. Getting along with humans, it lamented, was much harder than it looked. It needed a new plan. It had to engage in a proper chat. The grand dining hall was filled with the celebratory aroma of roasted meat. A chef, beaming with pride, presented his masterpiece to Lady Jelly, a deluxe steak with 3 glistening layers, garnished with vibrant vegetables and topped with a small flag bearing the ducal crest. He explained that the dish was an expression of both the highest quality meat and his own passionate dedication. The slime's eyes sparkled, its new human mouth watering in anticipation. This, it thought, was true passion. It picked up a shaker, eager to begin, as Aaron watched from the side with an impressed smile. The chef added that he had even decorated the top with the ducal crest, a tiny sword planted in the magnificent tower of meat. After the magnificent meal, Aaron leaned forward with a napkin and gently asked for her lady's pardon as she wiped a smudge from the corner of her mouth. Hiding near the doorway, the senior maid and the blonde maid flinched, a chill running down their spines. The senior maid's mind filled with a terrifying image, the real Lady Jelly, foot planted on a downed Aaron's back, whip held high in triumph. For a servant to touch the lady's face without permission was to invite a terrible punishment. But the punishment never came. The slime simply thanked Aaron, telling the young maid she was very thoughtful. Aaron blushed and offered her own thanks with a happy giggle. The two older maids could only stare in disbelief. The blonde maid whispered that it was impossible. The senior maid, dumbfounded, began to wonder if Aaron was not a fool, but perhaps an unbelievably incredible maid. Suddenly, a silver fork clattered to the floor beside the slime's chair. A young butler rushed over and knelt, explaining that he would prepare a new one immediately. The slime, however, asked what he meant by another one. A twitch of something unfamiliar, a flicker of the body's old memory, passed through it. It ordered the butler to hand over the dropped fork. The nervous servant complied, wrapping the utensil in a napkin before presenting it. The slime took it, noting that the fork felt a little too heavy. It then told the butler to hold out his hand. The butler obeyed, his face pale with sweat. The slime, believing it had figured something out, slammed the fork down into the man's open palm. The butler let out a sharp gasp of pain. The slime smiled, stating that it knew the fork was heavy. It then took a step forward. The butler, now on his knees and clutching his injured hand, looked up in absolute terror as a small pool of blood began to form on the floor beneath his fingers. He stammered that he would immediately prepare a lighter fork. The slime understood. The butler understood. It was a memory that haunted every servant in the manor. They all remembered the real Lady Jelly, her voice a cruel purr, grinding her high-heeled shoe into the butler's bleeding hand. The man's agonizing scream had echoed in the hall. The memory continued, with Lady Jelly picking up a table knife, wondering aloud if it was only the fork that was heavy. She had advanced on the terrified butler, musing that some punishment was necessary. Other butlers had rushed forward then, begging her to stop. One pleaded that any more would be too much. Lady Jelly had turned to them, her expression cold as ice, remarking that they thought very highly of themselves to interrupt her. They had begged her forgiveness, insisting that the man would surely die if she used a knife. The image of the real Lady Jelly's gleeful, sadistic smile was burned into their minds. She had laughed, asking them if they truly believed she would make such a mistake. After all, she had declared, if she killed him, she wouldn't be able to hear his screams anymore. In the present, the staff watched the new, kind Lady Jelly, but the memory of the devil who saw people as nothing more than toys lingered. One maid thought that there was no way the lady could ever truly reform unless her entire interior was replaced. Among them stood a butler, his face cast in shadow. He watched the peaceful scene and clenched his fists. This was the man who had tried to poison her. That's right, he thought, his resolve hardening. He could just do it again. He had no more time to worry. He reached into his coat, his gloved fingers finding a small locket. Inside was a picture of a smiling young girl. He gazed at it for a moment, his determination solidifying. He had to do it even if he was on his own. He watched the slime eating happily with Aaron and the chef nearby, and his mind twisted their joy into a cruel farce meant to mock him. He promised himself that he would have the last laugh. He had nowhere left to run. The devil had to be killed. That night, the grand mansion was quiet under a starry sky. In the ladies' chambers, Aaron brushed the slime's long blonde hair, chattering away about how her family had made a big fuss when she left home for work. She suddenly stopped, flustered, and apologized for talking so much about herself. But the slime just smiled with its eyes closed and told her it was nothing, encouraging her to go on. It was still trying to figure out how to apologize for making her cry the other day, but it seemed unnecessary now. For some reason, this human was more attached to it than any other. Humans were complicated, but the slime was just happy that Aaron didn't seem to hate it. After a while, Aaron wished her lady a good night. The slime returned the sentiment, and the ornate bedroom door clicked shut behind the young maid. Finally alone, The slime let out a sigh of relief. It walked to the window, and for a moment, saw the reflection of the original, stern-faced Lady Jelly staring back. It made a few playful faces, puffing out its cheeks, but the reflection remained cold and unmoved. It poked at its new face, slowly getting used to the complex human form. Just then, a window began to rattle, and a draft sent a shiver through its body. Such a simple thing, yet so cold. Deciding it was better to be safe than sorry, the slime pushed the rattling window shut. It then walked to a small desk, picked up a letter opener, and took a deep breath. With a grimace, it deliberately sliced the tip of its index finger. A single, clear droplet welled up from the cut. The droplet began to bubble and pop, splitting into two tiny, distinct spheres. Two small slime creatures, each with a pair of eyes, now hopped in the slime's hands. The process left it feeling dizzy and exhausted. 2 was its limit for now. The cut on its finger was already healing, but slowly. It held the 2 mini slimes in its cupped hands and gave them an order, telling them to watch the door and the window. They just stared back, confused. A thought bubble filled with meat appeared above one of their heads. The slime sighed in frustration. Its telepathic link was weaker in this human body. It tried again, this time speaking aloud, telling them to watch the door and the window, and to recombine and alert it if anything happened. The 2 mini slimes bounced with an enthusiastic cheer. One flattened itself and slipped silently into the crack at the bottom of the window. The other did the same, sliding into the thin gap between the grand double doors. Satisfied that its alarm system was in place, the slime danced happily on its enormous bed. This comfortable life would be its forever as soon as the culprit was caught. It flopped backward onto the plush mattress and drifted into a peaceful sleep. Sometime later, the door to the room opened without a sound. A pair of polished black shoes stepped silently onto the carpet. In the mansion's dimly lit hallway, the shadowed butler carried a folded white blanket. Another servant saw him and asked if he was still working. The shadowed butler explained that it would be chilly that night, so he thought he would give Lady Jelly a blanket. The other servant praised his hard work and waved goodbye. As he turned away, a knife, hidden behind the shadowed butler's back, caught the faint light. The would-be assassin smiled, a sinister gleam in his eyes, and offered his thanks as he continued toward his lady's chambers. A shadow crept through the manor's quiet halls. The butler stood before the lady's grand double doors, a folded white blanket draped over one arm. With a gloved hand he slowly turned the ornate knob. The latch gave a soft creak as the door swung inward, spilling a sliver of hallway light into the dark chamber. At the base of the stationary door, a tiny slime quivered. As the intruder stepped inside, the dim light caught the cold, sharp gleam of a knife blade hidden beneath the blanket. The mini slime reacted instantly, a silent alarm flashing through its simple mind. The butler moved toward the large canopy bed where his lady slept, her face serene and peaceful in the moonlight. He loomed over her, his own face a mask of shadow, his mind a storm of furious resolve. He thought of her as a heinous villainess, whose saintly sleeping face was nothing but a cruel deception. At the foot of the bed, the tiny slime guard, having recognized the butler but sensing his deadly intent, sent a frantic telepathic warning to its main body. For now, it would wake the host. It then dissolved into a liquid stream and slipped silently back into the lady's form. A memory of the previous evening flickered in the butler's mind, Lady Jelly, smiling and happy with Aaron and the chef. He shook his head, trying to banish the image. He cursed himself for his weakness, for his hesitation. He had no more time to worry. Steeling his nerves, he raised the knife high with both hands, its polished steel gleaming in the darkness. He commanded himself to just do it, to plunge the blade straight into her heart. At that exact moment, her eyes snapped open. The butler froze, a strangled gasp catching in his throat. He was staring directly into her wide, awake eyes. Sheer terror seized him. He let out a muffled shriek, and in a fit of panic, the slime sat up, a look of confusion on its face. The butler stammered, his mind racing for an excuse. He couldn't believe she had woken up. He forced a strained, shaky laugh and explained that it was growing very cold that night. The slime shivered, pulling the blanket around its shoulders and agreeing that it was indeed a bit chilly. Greatly relieved, the butler smiled, explaining that he had brought the blanket for that very reason. He then bowed low, carefully hiding the knife behind his back, and told her he would accept any punishment for entering her room without permission. The slime waved the idea away, telling him that no punishment was needed and that he had been very helpful. It then paused, trying to recall his name. The butler, Will, told her that her kind words were more than he deserved. His mind was in turmoil. He wondered if she had really reformed. The thought was quickly crushed by another, more powerful image, the face of a young girl in a locket. He told himself it didn't matter if she had changed, it would not save Emma. Killing the wicked Lady Jelly, he thought, was the only way. As his resolve hardened again, another tiny slime, stationed on the nearby windowsill, watched the tense standoff with growing alarm. It saw the shift in the butler's posture, the tightening of his grip on the hidden weapon. The mini-slime knew what was coming. Suddenly, Will lunged forward, the knife raised high, his face a mask of pained finality. He thought to himself that this was the end. Yet the lady simply sat there, looking up at him with a gentle, unwavering smile. Acting on pure instinct, the mini-slime on the windowsill launched itself at a nearby nightstand. A vase of flowers tipped, teetered, and then crashed to the floor, shattering loudly. The slime in the bed turned toward the noise, its calm expression turning to one of mild confusion. But the distraction was too late. Will ignored the sound completely, his arm already plunging downward. The slime's eyes widened in terror as it finally registered the descending blade. With a startled cry, its hands shot up, catching Will's wrists just inches from its chest. He stared down in disbelief, the knife stopped dead in its tracks. He grunted and strained, trying to force the blade down, but her grip was like iron. The slime held him fast, its mind reeling. That was too close. It was only thanks to its little sentinel that it had been warned in time. As they struggled, a chilling realization washed over the slime. If he cut it, if this human body was pierced, its true form would be revealed. It would be done for. Will snarled, telling it to let go. The slime calmly agreed. It released its grip in an instant, and using his own forward momentum against him, it spun him around. Will cried out in surprise as he was sent tumbling head over heels, landing hard on the carpeted floor. The slime noted with surprise how weak the human was, and reminded itself to be more careful with its newfound strength. Will rolled to a stop and pushed himself up, his face contorted with rage. He called her a wretch and demanded to know how much longer she would toy with him as he charged forward again. Standing to meet him, the slime's expression turned serious. It apologized in advance, telling him this was going to hurt a little. As he lunged, the slime moved with impossible speed. It stepped inside his guard, neatly plucking the knife from his hand and giving him a light tap in the stomach. He gasped in shock. The slime then followed with an open palm strike to his chest that sent him flying backward. He crumpled to the floor in a heap. The slime stood over him, now holding his knife, a look of genuine panic on its face as it worried that it had overdone it. It hurried to his side, asking anxiously if he was all right. Will looked up from the floor, his face a mask of pain and utter confusion. He asked why was she showing him concern? He then confessed that he was the one, that he was sure he had thrown her off a cliff and that the heinous villainous Jelly had died there. The slime froze, the confession hitting it with the force of a physical blow. A faint, ghostly memory of falling surfaced, the memory of a body that was not its own, and of a shadowy figure standing at the cliff's edge. It looked down at the anguished butler. So it was him. At that moment, a sharp knock came from the bedroom door. A voice called out, asking if Lady Jelly was safe, having heard the loud crash. The slime glanced from the door to the defeated man on the floor. If it told the truth, Will would be caught. It imagined a peaceful life, happy with Aaron and the others, a life that was now suddenly within reach. It was a chance to end all this, but something about it felt hollow, leaving a bad taste in its mouth. The doorknob began to turn. Without another thought, the slime rushed to the door and slammed it shut. It shouted through the wood that it was fine, that it had just knocked over some furniture in the dark. From the floor, Will stared in absolute shock, unable to comprehend why she was protecting him. Outside, the other servant accepted the excuse, wished her a good night, and walked away. The slime peeked out to make sure the hall was clear before leaning back against the door with a sigh of relief. It then turned to Will, its expression serious. It told him to explain. At the same time, Will asked why she had helped him. He reached into his coat and pulled out the small, silver locket. He held it out to her. The slime took it, confused, and opened the clasp to reveal the faded photograph of a smiling young girl. It asked what it was. Will looked down at the floor, saying that as he expected, she didn't remember. He told her it was the sister he had spoken of before. He explained that he was supposed to get help for his sister by killing her. The slime's mind raced. Help your sister? It closed its eyes, the pieces clicking into place. Its eyes snapped open with dawning comprehension. Will looked up from the floor, his voice filled with a desperate, fragile hope. He asked her if she remembered now. In the tense silence of the room, he sat slumped in defeat against the door. The slime stood across from him, staring at the locket in its hand. As Will knelt on the floor, his question hanging in the tense air, a flood of alien memories crashed over the slime. It was the past, but not its own, the wicked past of the body it now inhabited. The memory began in a manicured garden. The original Lady Jelly had stood silhouetted against the setting sun, demanding to know what kind of conversation Will wished to have in such a place. He had stood before her, nervous and hesitant, apologizing for making such a personal request. With his hands clenched at his sides, he began to explain that he had a sister who was ill. The lady had simply prompted him to continue, her expression cold and unimpressed. The memory deepened, and Will's desperation became palpable. He had bowed low before her, practically prostrating himself on the stone patio. He declared that he would do anything to save his sick Emma, pleading with Lady Jelly, the so-called saint, for her help. The words, anything, seemed to catch her interest, a flicker of something cruel in her eyes. She mused that his offer sounded pleasant, agreeing to consider it if he would amuse her. He had looked up with firm, desperate resolve, agreeing to her terms. Then came the amusement. The memory shifted to a horrifying scene of carnage. The original Lady Jelly stood over a beaten and bloodied maid, a wide, cheerful, and utterly innocent smile on her face as she gestured toward the violence she had wrought. Will had stood stiffly behind her, his own face a mask as he looked down, thinking how deceptively innocent her smile was. The cruelty had only escalated. Lady Jelly, her face splattered with blood, had coldly informed Will that one of the maid could no longer cry out and ordered him to dispose of the body. He had stared in shock. She then grabbed his arm, a bloodied knife in her other hand, and reminded him of his promise to do anything for his sister. She promised to cure Emma immediately if he disposed of the body well. When Will, holding another knife she had given him, asked in horror what crime the maid had committed, Lady Jelly seemed to ponder the question. She flippantly suggested the reason was a window the maid had cleaned that remained foggy. With a wide, sadistic smile, she told him that if she could not punish the innocent, she would simply invent her own crimes. She sneered that she hated pigs who were bad at cleaning and canaries that had stopped crying, asking him if he thought he could clean properly. Will stood trembling, clutching the knife with both hands. With a pained smile, he assured her he would take care of it as she turned to leave, telling him to come and report to her when he had finished. Left alone, Will knelt beside the broken maid. The woman looked up at him, blood dripping from her mouth, and weakly begged him to just kill her. He looked down at her, his hands trembling as he gripped the knife. Then, raising the blade high over his head, he brought it down not on her, but on the ropes binding her wrists, slicing them free. The maid stared up at him in dazed confusion. He held her in his arms, whispering urgently for her not to talk, but to act as if he had killed her. She agreed, her body going limp in his arms. He led her to a hidden door in a stone wall, handing her a bag with her bloody uniform inside. He told her she could escape from there without being found. The maid, still bruised, asked where she could possibly run. Will gave her a sealed letter of introduction to a friend in a neighboring country, urging her to start a new life there. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the letter, telling him he had done too much and worrying that he would be in danger if Lady Jelly found out. He simply smiled, reassuring her that it was okay and that he had a plan to outwit her. With a final, grateful thank you, the maid fled through the door. Will then put his plan into motion. He stood in the garden, holding the bundle of the bloody uniform, and waved up with a smile to Lady Jelly, who watched him from her window with a cold, knowing smirk. He dug a shallow grave, making sure the gossipy senior maids witnessed the scene from another window. He patted down the fresh mound of dirt, confident that word would soon spread that the maid he had killed was buried there. Believing his deception was complete, he went to his lady's room to report that he had finished his task. She was waiting for him. With a pleasant smile, she told him he had done good work and asked if it was difficult. He forced a laugh and said it was surprisingly easy, then asked about their arrangement. Lady Jelly agreed she had to keep her word and handed him a small, ornate bottle, telling him to give the drink to his sister to save her immediately. Overjoyed, Will accepted it, believing it to be holy water. But then she questioned his assumption, asking if she had ever said it was holy water. When he asked what it was, a gleeful, cruel sneer spread across her face. She announced that of course it was poison, and that if his sister drank it, she would immediately be saved from the suffering of this world. She stifled a laugh as Will stood frozen in shock and despair. She pointed at him, her face alight with cruel glee, shouting that his was the face she had wanted to see. She mocked him for thinking he could outwit her, declaring that the face of someone in despair was supreme. His hand clenched the bottle of poison, his mind screaming damnation at the devil before him. Just as the memory of Lady Jelly wondered aloud what she would like him to do next, the vision shattered. The shock hit the slime in the present with the force of a physical blow. A silent scream ripped through its mind as it stared, horrified, at the butler on the floor. Will looked up, his expression desperate and hopeful. He asked again if it remembered now. The slime was flustered, sweating, its eyes wide with the remembered horror. It could only manage a choked sound of confirmation. As it imagined a sick little girl accusing it of being a heinous villainess, everything clicked into place. His sister was sick. Its expression hardened. With a soft click, it closed the locket and slowly lowered itself to the floor, kneeling before the stunned butler. Will asked what it was doing. The slime looked at him, its gaze serious and determined, and explained that it had a favor to ask in exchange for overlooking his attack. It held the locket out to him with both hands, its voice steady as it asked if he would be willing to trust it again. They left the manor together, embarking on a journey to save Will's sister. Their path led them away from the cold stone of the estate and deep into a dense forest, finally arriving at a small, rustic house nestled in a quiet clearing. As a cat prowled past, they entered the simple home. Inside a sparse bedroom, Will stood anxiously by the wall, his hands clenched. He watched as Lady Jelly leaned over the bedside of a young girl, his sister, Emma. The girl lay still, her breathing shallow, lost to the illness. Hoping against all reason, he had allowed her to examine Emma, but doubt was a poison in his veins. He questioned if he was right to trust her, if this woman, the so-called saint, was truly what she now seemed to be. The slime could feel his stare, a palpable weight of suspicion in the small room. It knew he didn't trust it yet. It would be wonderful if it could simply call upon a saint's holy power, but it had no idea how. Still, it reasoned, it did have a saint's body. It decided it would have to try. Closing its eyes, the slime took a deep breath and raised its hands, trying to focus some unknown energy. It held them over Emma's still form, concentrating intently, but felt nothing. Giving up with a flicker of frustration, it knew it would have to cure her its own way. Its gaze fell upon a small wooden table beside the bed, where a pitcher of water, some apples, and a small paring knife rested on a tray. It walked over to the table as Will watched, his expression turning from doubt to apprehension. The slime picked up the knife, and with a quick, deliberate motion, sliced the tip of its own finger. Will's eyes widened as he saw a single, clear droplet fall from the cut and dissolve into the pitcher of water. Winking at the skeptical butler, the slime announced that it would now expel the illness from Emma's body. It explained that it would first cleanse her insides with holy water. The words hung in the air, thick with the memory of another promise. Will's face tightened. He wondered if this was truly holy water, his mind flashing back to the ornate bottle of poison he had once been given with a similar smile. The slime understood his hesitation. It was only natural that he would doubt it after being handed poison before. To cure the girl, it first needed the brother's trust. It poured the water from the pitcher into a cup and, as Will watched in shock, drank from it. Lowering the cup, it offered him a confident smile, asking if he would also like to try it. When he remained frozen, it turned back to the bed. It gently lifted Emma's head and brought the cup to her lips, letting the water trickle into her mouth. Emma remained still, her fever unbroken. The slime frowned. Its diluted split was not strong enough. It needed a new plan. Turning to Will, it asked him for a favor, requesting that he go and fetch some more water to cool his sister's fever. Will, flustered but obedient, agreed at once and hurried from the room. As the door closed behind him, the slime acted quickly. Apologizing under its breath, it promised to heal the wound later. It used the knife to make a tiny incision on Emma's finger. Then, concentrating, it allowed a part of its main body to liquefy and slip from its finger directly into the cut, intending to fight the illness from within. Moments later, Will rushed back in, carrying a wooden bucket. He apologized for the delay before squeezing water from a cloth and gently placing the damp compress on Emma's forehead. He then stood uncertainly by the bedside. The slime, hands clasped before it, spoke with a gentle authority. It told him to take his sister's hand and pray that her illness would be cured, assuring him that she would then surely feel better. Holding Emma's small hand in both of his, Will leaned over her, his heart aching. He cried out her name. He thought of how this woman, Lady Jelly, was seriously trying to cure his sister, while he himself had tried to kill her twice. He swore that he would atone for that sin for the rest of his life. Bowing his head, he pressed Emma's hand to his forehead and prayed, pleading with whatever power Lady Jelly possessed to grant a fool's wish and save Emma. Outside, the quiet was broken as the house cat lunged at a gathering of doves. The birds scattered in a panic, flapping wildly. In a chaotic surge, the flock crashed against the window, slamming it open and bursting into the room. The slime jolted in surprise as birds and feathers filled the air. A brilliant light erupted, flooding the small bedroom and forcing Will to shield his eyes. When the light subsided, Will lowered his arm and stared, his mouth agape. Lady Jelly stood serenely in the center of the room, bathed in a soft glow as doves flew around her and feathers drifted gently to the floor. On the bed, Emma stirred. She groaned, the damp cloth falling from her forehead as her eyes fluttered open. Her gaze found her brother's, and she weakly asked if it was him. A tear streamed down Will's face. It was a miracle. Overcome with emotion, he lunged forward and hugged his sister tightly. Still held in the embrace, Emma looked over Will's shoulder with concern, asking who their guest was. Will pulled back and helped her sit up. He explained that this was Lady Jelly, the saint whom he served, who had taken time from her busy schedule just to cure her. Emma stared, her mouth wide open in disbelief as she repeated the word, saint. The slime stepped forward with a gentle smile and greeted the girl, asking how she was feeling. Emma looked down, placing a hand on her chest in surprise. She realized it was no longer hard to breathe. With tears of gratitude streaming down his face, Will bowed deeply, thanking Lady Jelly from the bottom of his heart. The slime felt a wave of relief. It had managed to complete the healing without anyone discovering it was a monster. Now, it thought it could finally enjoy its human life in peace. Then a thought struck it, and it recalled their fight from the previous night. It had sent him flying across the room with inhuman strength. It panicked, wondering if he had realized then what it truly was. As if on cue, Will, still bowing, mentioned that he had something to ask about last night. The slime's heart hammered in its chest. It knew this was it, but Will straightened up, a confident, knowing smile on his face. He asked about the power she had used to stop him before he committed another crime. He declared that surely, that too was a saint's power. The slime's panic vanished, replaced by overwhelming relief. It squeezed its eyes shut in a huge, blushing smile and eagerly confirmed his theory, adding that it was a secret he must never tell anyone. Will replied that he had figured as much. Trying to solidify the misunderstanding, the slime added that if it ever tried to do something weird again, Will must stop it before people found out. Tears welled in Will's eyes. He saw not a confession of a secret power, but a plea for help. He was a true saint. He pictured her past self, the cruel woman with a whip, a demonic shadow looming behind her. He now believed that Lady Jelly had been possessed by a demon all this time. The saint's training had finally purified her, and she was now her true, kind self. He knelt before her. As she extended her hand, he took it and, with the utmost reverence, pressed his lips to it. He swore his complete service, vowing to give all of himself to this lady. The slime stood stunned, having only meant to offer a handshake. It sighed internally. Communicating with humans was hard, after all. Far away, at an ornate mansion surrounded by lush gardens, a maid nervously approached a young woman with short hair who was reading on a stone ledge. The maid reported that Jelly had reformed. The young woman snapped her book shut, finding the news far-fetched. There was no way that Saint would reform without a reason, she thought. Hopping down from the ledge, she clutched the book to her chest with a determined look. She wondered aloud what Jelly Aspic was up to. A new saint had appeared, and she, Saint Celestria, declared that she must investigate. In the grand library of the Aspic Manor, the slime wondered what kind of saint it was supposed to be. It sat at a large desk surrounded by towering shelves, the air thick with the scent of old paper and leather. It couldn't use the saint's power when it cured Emma, but it reasoned that since it had a saint's body, it should be able to. It flipped through a heavy tome, looking at an illustration of a robed figure simply holding out a hand to heal a kneeling person. Even though it had been studying since morning, the concepts were so complicated it had no idea where to begin. A maid named Erin entered the room, carrying a silver tray. She offered Lady Jelly some tea, suggesting she take a little break. The slime thanked her and agreed. Erin then explained that since it was also lunchtime, she had brought a light meal to enjoy with the tea. The slime's eyes widened in anticipation, imagining a magnificent mountain of sandwiches and pastries. When it looked down, however, it saw only a small plate with 4 triangular sandwiches. It asked what they were, and a confused Aaron confirmed that they were, in fact, sandwiches. The slime picked one up, marveling at the creation. Salad and meat were placed between thin slices of bread, a food it could hold in one hand and eat while reading. It wondered if the flavors would be mixed if eaten all at once. Taking a bite, its eyes lit up with pure delight. It was so good. It thought to itself that human ideas were truly amazing. As Aaron smiled and moved to pour the tea, the hot liquid suddenly splashed over her hand. The slime turned in alarm, asking if she was all right. Aaron clutched her scalded hand, apologizing and promising to remake the tea at once. She insisted that it was nothing, but the slime, panicking internally over the burn, took her hand to look. The image of the saint from the book flashed in its mind. Holding Aaron's hand, the slime raised its other hand just above the red skin and tried to focus. Aaron gasped softly. She looked down at her hand, which now seemed to have a faint glow, and said with wonder that the pain felt like it was going away. She thanked Lady Jelly, certain that this must be a miracle from her power as a saint. The slime felt a surge of pride, thinking it had used the power quite well this time. It accepted her praise with a pleased smile. Just then, Will appeared in the doorway, knocking to announce his presence. The slime greeted him and immediately asked how Emma was feeling. Will was happy to report that his sister had fully recovered and was now practicing walking again. The slime smiled, glad to hear it. With a hand over his heart, Will declared that it was all thanks to Lady Jelly's power as a saint. The slime thought to itself that it was really its power as a slime, but simply told him not to worry about it, feeling a bit flustered. Will then noticed the 2 women holding hands and asked if something had happened. Erin cheerfully explained that she had burned her hand a little and that Lady Jelly was healing her with her power. Will's face went blank with shock. An image of the true miracle, Lady Jelly surrounded by light and doves, flashed in his mind. He bluntly told Erin that it was just her imagination, insisting that she had not yet seen Lady Jelly's true power. Erin shouted in disbelief, but Will took her by the shoulders, trying to reason with her. She argued that it felt like the pain had just disappeared, and he pointed out that she herself had said it only felt like it. As they argued, the slime, sweating nervously, tried to sneak back to its seat. It felt a wave of relief. It had been so close to being found out, and had almost gotten the wrong idea about being able to use the saint's power so easily. As it nervously ate a sandwich, the slime realized that even Will knew about the saint's power as if it were common knowledge. The fact that it, a saint, did not, made it seem even more suspicious. The thought was interrupted when Will turned and asked Lady Jelly to confirm that she hadn't used her power, still holding a protesting Erin back. In that moment, the slime had an idea. It could just ask Will. It approached him with a sly smile and lightly tapped him on the chest, telling him that he was quite perceptive. Will, flustered but pleased, accepted the compliment. He then pointed out that it was suspicious that Erin, her own maid, did not know about the saint's power. The slime smoothly replied that Erin was still new, so it was natural for her not to know. It then commanded Will to take this opportunity to give her a simple explanation. Will immediately agreed. He began by explaining that saints were those who kept the peace of the country. They treated injuries and illnesses that doctors could not, identified sources of infection, and were sometimes recruited for medical teams during major wars. They also maintained barriers to keep monsters from entering towns. In short, he concluded, the saint's power was a power to protect the country and its people. Listening to the explanation, the slime felt a sense of purpose. This was exactly what it aspired to be. It knew it could do things similar to a saint's power using its own slime abilities. If it acted like a saint, everyone would stop resenting it, and it could live a much safer life. But it also recognized the risk. If it used its slime abilities too much, especially in crowded places, its identity could be revealed. It clenched its fist in determination. It had to learn to use the real saint's power, no matter what. After all, it never knew who might try to kill it at any moment. Will, finished with his lecture, told Erin to hurry to the doctor's office just in case. As Erin ran from the room, the slime called out to Will. It reminded him that he had been told Emma would be saved if he completed his request, and then asked him who the client was. Will jolted. He confessed that all he knew was that it was a man in a black hood. The slime asked why he would trust such a person, and Will admitted that he had lost his composure watching Emma get weaker every day. He also revealed that the man had shown him a miracle, reviving a small dead bird right in front of him. Seeing that made him trust the man without question. He looked down in regret, acknowledging that in retrospect it could have been a simple trick, but he had been swayed by the promise to save his sister if he killed Lady Jelly. The slime grew pensive. The previous jelly had more enemies than it had imagined. It wondered if there was anyone it could talk to about this. Suddenly, Will's eyes widened in realization. He announced that a letter had arrived for Lady Jelly. He presented a white envelope, and when asked who it was from, he revealed it was from Saint Celestria. The slime froze, trying to place the name. Will noticed her confusion and asked if she had forgotten. Playing it off, the slime insisted that of course it remembered, while a vague image of a stern-looking young girl with short hair surfaced in its memory. It opened the letter and read its contents, announcing with surprise that it was an invitation to a tea party. Will looked horrified at the thought of a tea party hosted by Lady Celestria. But the slime saw a golden opportunity. If Celestria was a saint, then she must know how to use their power. If they could get along, she would surely teach it. With a confident smile, it handed the invitation back to a worried Will and announced that she was going, of course. Will could only stare, mouth agape in disbelief, while the slime smiled back, seemingly unaware of his shock. The scene changes and a carriage is seen rattling down a cobblestone street, and the slime looked out the window, content. It thought about how nice it was to be a noble and not have to travel on its own 2 feet. It then remembered Will's shocked reaction and wondered why he had been so against the idea. It turned and asked why he was accompanying her. Will, sitting across from her, explained that it was for her safety. He opened a wicker basket filled with sandwiches, adding that while he knew his own shortcomings, he would protect her with his life. The slime glanced at the sandwiches, a bit of drool at its mouth. It then smiled warmly at Will and told him that in that case, it couldn't allow him to come. Emma, it explained, would be furious if anything happened to him. Internally, it also thought that its secrets might be revealed if he was around too much. Will, moved to tears by her apparent selflessness, clenched his fist and vowed to do his best. As the carriage continued on its way, the slime happily munched on a sandwich, telling him that it by no means allowed him to come just for the food. It thought about how the previous jelly had been so crazy, its own impression of saints had been warped. But from Will's explanation, saints seemed to be excellent people. Looking out the window as their destination grew closer, it felt a rush of excitement. It wondered if it could make a friend and hoped, with all its heart, that this other saint would be kind. The carriage came to a halt before a grand, classical-style mansion. Its grounds were vast, with hedges and trees trimmed into perfect, severe shapes. The atmosphere was one of rigid order, and the slime felt a thrill of anticipation. This was it, a face-to-face meeting with another saint. Looking out, it saw its host, Saint Celestria, already waiting at the top of the entrance stairs with 2 attendants. Full of excitement, the slime disembarked. It thought to itself how kind Celestria was to come all the way out to greet it. This was surely the start of a wonderful day. Beaming with a wide, happy smile, it approached her and offered a cheerful greeting, hoping they would have some fun together. In a pristine garden, near a large fountain topped with an angel statue, they sat at an ornate table. Saint Celestria gestured welcomingly as a maid placed a tray of baked goods on the table. The maid announced that she had brought a treat to go with their tea. The slime's eyes went wide, a blush of excitement coloring its cheeks as it stared at a large, steaming pastry. It was clear they were truly welcome here. As the slime exclaimed over what a lovely baked good it was, Celestria simply watched, looking dazed and unamused as she held her teacup. The maid, trembling with a pained smile, thanked the slime for its kind words. She stammered that for today, they had an apple pie. The slime noticed her fearful reaction as the maid sliced into the pie, thinking that the maid clearly knew what the previous jelly had been like. Celestria simply encouraged her to dig in. The slime observed the stark contrast between the terrified maid and the confident Celestria, who was served her own pie with an air of perfect ease. It came to a happy conclusion. This feeling of being on equal footing meant that they were friends. With a clatter of utensils, the maid served her a large, sparkling slice of pie. The moment it took a bite, the slime was in heaven. The fragrant smell alone was sinfully delicious. It crunched into the crust, its eyes filling with tears of bliss. Munching away, it admired the fountain, thinking that human ideas were truly the best. To be able to feast in such a beautiful place was proof of their genius. It held up a piece on its fork, glowing with pure happiness. Across the table, Celestria stared, her expression a mixture of shock and disgust. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed intently on the slime. Startled, the slime quickly composed itself, putting on a serene smile. It had been so close to letting its true nature show. Its identity would be revealed if it didn't get its act together. Trying to act refined, the slime held its teacup and complimented how delicious everything was, though a bead of sweat ran down its temple. Celestria sipped her own tea, her gaze sharp and unimpressed. She told Jelly to stop the terrible acting and show her true identity. The slime spat out its tea in a great spray, its eyes wide with panic. What identity was she talking about? Celestria, her arms crossed, calmly explained that her actions and behavior were completely different than before. She demanded to know what, exactly, she was up to. Relief washed over the slime. She was talking about the old Jelly. It smiled brightly and explained that its change was all thanks to the saint's training. Celestria seemed unconvinced. Flustered, the slime took another bite of pie, worrying that its attempts to make a friend were failing. Celestria then mentioned that, speaking of saints, she had heard a rumor that Jelly had cured an illness with her power. She added with a smug look that she found that very hard to believe. The slime cheerfully asked if she was talking about Emma. Stunned for a moment, Celestria accused it of fabricating a story that would be found out immediately. The slime just smiled serenely and explained that Emma was the sister of her precious butler, and that it had properly cured her. Jelly's butler turned to her, first asking if it was true, and then confirming that it was. Celestria fell silent, her hand clenching a napkin in frustration. She couldn't believe it. She remembered how the old Jelly used to laugh contemptuously whenever she was told to act like a saint. The thought that Jelly had actually reformed because of training seemed impossible. She looked at the slime with suspicion and asked what kind of special training it had undergone. The slime smiled mysteriously, explaining that a wonderful goddess had told it various things, including the way to become human. Celestria's eyes widened in sudden, shocked realization. She asked, her voice trembling, if it meant that Jelly had received a revelation. The slime panicked for a second, but then saw how convenient this explanation was. It stuttered that this appeared to be the case. Stumbling over its words, it tried to recall what this supposed goddess might have said, muttering something about reforming past deeds and serving the people. Celestria trembled with an intense, angry expression. She demanded to know if the Jelly was truly saying that the goddess had given her words directly. Before the Jelly could answer, Celestria shot up from her seat, causing the slime to recoil in shock. The slime stared back, terrified, wondering what it could have possibly said that was so wrong. Celestria shouted that receiving a revelation was a massive responsibility. It meant leading all the other saints and facing great difficulties as a beacon for the people. As she spoke, the slime, in a state of absolute panic, started chugging its tea, knowing it was too late to back out now. Celestria made a frustrated, choking sound. Looking unsteady, she apologized and said she needed to step out for a moment. She asked if they could speak privately later, and the slime naturally agreed. As she walked away, her butler informed the slime that he would be wandering the courtyard. Alone for a moment, Celestria's mind reeled. She couldn't believe Jelly had received a revelation. Back at the table, the slime was also in disbelief, happily eating pie and wondering what the beacon even was. In a secluded hallway, Celestria punched a wall, cracking the plaster. She thought furiously about how hard she had worked every day. She had prayed, given alms to the less fortunate, and traveled to heal the sick with her power. And yet, the goddess had spoken to Jelly of all people. She gritted her teeth, remembering the smug look on the slime's face. She would not be looked down upon. Then a thought struck her. She stopped, her eyes widening. This had to be a trap. The old Jelly she knew would never get a revelation. This was just some elaborate trick to humiliate her. A confident, smug expression spread across her face. She had almost fallen for it. She thought about how Jelly must have wanted to roar with laughter at her, but she wouldn't buy it. Vowing to find even the slightest flaw, she declared that she would not tolerate a rogue who impersonated God. Meanwhile, back at the garden table, the slime was in a panic of its own. It looked down at its empty plate, crumbs dotting its face. This was bad. He had eaten the entire pie.